You're listening to The Higher Ed Marketer, the podcast for marketing professionals in higher education. Join us every week as we talk to the industry's greatest minds in student recruitment, donor relations, marketing trends, new technologies, and much more. If you're looking for conversations centered around where marketing in higher ed is going, this podcast is for you. Let's get into the show.
Your vision has to exceed your inconvenience. This was just one of the powerful quotes that was shared with Bart and I by our guest, Dr. Gayle Beebe, president at Westmont College, the author of the book, Crucibles That Shape Us, Navigating the Defining Challenges of Leadership. And Bart, Dr. Beebe goes into a wonderful conversation with us on how higher ed leaders turn adversity into strength.
Yeah, I was really fascinating in this conversation. He really goes into a lot of great details, and even just the beginning that he just kind of drops the what's something you learned lately. As soon as you hear this, you're going to be like, wow, this guy really is studied and really a thoughtful leader. I really appreciated too just the types of people that he studied under. I mean, he actually was a student under Peter Drucker, and so things like that, as well as just the theology and studying at Princeton and other things. I was just really impressed with our conversation, and he's very engaged too. So he's very scholarly, but also very approachable, and I really appreciated getting to know him better.
Here's our conversation with Dr. Gayle Beebe. Dr. Beebe, Bart and I have fun by asking this question to every one of our guests to get the conversation going and to learn a little bit about their thinking. And so this question simply is, if you can share something that you've recently learned, read, or experienced that our audience might find interesting or new.
Well, one that comes instantly to mind, Henry Kissinger has recently released a book. I mean, we know he's passed away in this last year, but on his 100th birthday, a book came out entitled just simply Leadership. And it is, I have always been, a real devotee of Kissinger. I found him fascinating, even if controversial. And what he does in the book is he actually looks at 6 world leaders, 5 of whom he worked with, 1 of whom he worked for in terms of Richard Nixon. And what allowed them as world leaders to inherit a number of problems in their respective countries, but make significant advances that advance the mission and purpose of those countries in ways that were really groundbreaking and worthy of commendation. And as he nears the end of the book, he makes this comment. He quotes Alexis de Tocqueville that talks a great deal about the role of religion in American life. And Kissinger uses this quote to set up the fact that all 6 world leaders had a devout religious upbringing. Now, some of them are fairly well known, like Charles de Gaulle being devout Roman Catholic. But a person I actually had never known was Konrad Adenauer. And if I had heard his name, I didn't remember his name. But as it turns out, Adenauer was the first chancellor of Germany post-World War II. Now, can you imagine that assignment? How do you put the German nation back together? You've split into East and West Germany. You have the Holocaust to deal with. You have everything. And he said the reason Adenauer was chosen was because of his devout religious upbringing. He was known to be a person of integrity, and Hitler did not assassinate him. He was the long-serving mayor of Cologne, and Hitler put him under house arrest at a monastery in a totally remote area of Germany. Let him live. Well, the Kissinger goes through each of these personalities, and as I mentioned at the end, talks about the fact each of them had a devout religious upbringing, which gave them the discipline to actually persevere when they hit hardship. And I think that is just such a key quality of leadership, of not giving up, persevering, waiting until you get through a crisis to make any kind of dramatic personnel changes. but recognizing that part of the heart of successful leadership and effective leadership is just persevering when you're facing very tough odds or tough responsibilities.
Wow, that's fascinating.
That answer from you makes sense, and it's right on brand because you also have written a book. The title is Crucibles That Shape Us and Navigating the Defining Challenges of Leadership. And Dr. Beebe, what Bart and I would like to do is to lean on your expertise and some of the key themes and ideas from that book in going into the topic of discussion of how higher ed leaders turn adversity into strength. So you've spent more than 30 years in higher education leadership and would like to know what originally drew you to leadership in this area of higher ed.
Well, Troy, thank you for the question. I love the question. I actually started out in pastoral ministry, and when I was an undergraduate, did a liberal arts degree, history, sociology, and religion, did most of it at George Fox, did a really special consortium exchange visit at Westmont, where I'm president now. And basically, and then headed off to Princeton Theological Seminary for my MDiv. I was pastoring Sherwood Community French Church, a bedroom community of Portland, and just began to feel restless in the role. We had an encounter at a men's Bible study. We were doing an evening barbecue, and the person speaking was the president of a college, and he was actually kind of negative about the role of the church. And I thought, now this is interesting. He's the president of a religious college. He's negative towards the institution of the church. And so I actually, our clerk of elders was the chair of his board. And so I asked our clerk of elders, here's what happened. Why do you think he did that? And he said, well, the question I have for you is, if it bothered you so much, why don't you do something about it? Why don't you begin thinking about going back, doing your PhD, and becoming eligible? This may be something God's putting on your heart. That's literally how it started. So then he also said, don't do more philosophy. You've done so much philosophy, religion, historical theology, but I love it. So I found this amazing program at Claremont Graduate University where I could do a PhD in philosophy of religion and an MBA in strategic management. And then I wrote in my application at Claremont Graduate University, you had to write, what are you going to do with this degree if we actually admit you to the program? I wrote 7 objectives, number 7 being, I want to train pastors better than I believe I was trained, because I went to Princeton Theological Seminary. It's a fabulous seminary, except the one missing ingredient, you never take a single class in how to lead and manage the local church, and then you get out and you spend at least 50% of your time doing it. Well, I discovered that as I was pastoring. Then I went back for my dual degree. The thing I didn't really entertain or estimate was how attractive a dual degree is to hiring committees. And I was hired first into a mid-level role at Azusa Pacific University. I was dean of the School of Theology. And then I went from there to my first presidency at Spring Arbor University from 2000 to 2007. And then second presidency here at Westmont. We've been here 18 years. What was interesting is in all 3 interviews, the faculty were only interested in my PhD, asked me absolutely no questions about my MBA. The boards were only interested in my MBA, what was it like to study with Peter Drucker, et cetera. They never asked me a single question about my PhD. And I thought, okay, I think I did the right degree, because each has a distinct interest and it didn't overlap. That's probably a longer anecdote than you want, but it's meant to suggest, for me, it wasn't instantly obvious, but it was very much that sense of take the next step, trust God for the guidance, trust God to show up and help guide you into decisions that will actually influence your life. And then I have loved the rhythm of college life. I like the intense semesters and then the break, and then intense semesters and then the break. And then some of the work you do within the academic year, and then some of the work you do year round, like the development work, the donor development, the fundraising, resource acquisition. And so I like to work in categories, and so I always think about people, programs, property, plant, and equipment to fulfill your mission, resource acquisition. How do you plan both short-term and long-term? And then how do you maintain an aspiring edge? And the aspiring edge to me is individuals like institutions have to always be pursuing the next horizon. And if you ever lose your passion for the next horizon, you're going to stall out. People often ask me, don't you just get tired of the inconvenience of the job? And I always say, and I mean it sincerely, your vision has to always exceed your inconvenience. And if you're preoccupied with the inconvenience, you're already losing. And so those are ways in which I have both been led into developing myself as a leader, relying on a ton of input, both educationally and relationally, and then really being purposeful about my own learning. I really do believe in experience-based learning, but you have to pattern your life so that you have periods of regular reflection. I get up every morning at 4:00. That's not a virtue. I go to bed at 9. So yeah. I literally get 6.5 to 7 hours of sleep. But from 4 to 7, I get to read every morning. I do a prayer practice where I evaluate the day before. How did that go? How did that not go? Is there anybody I need to apologize to? Is there anybody I need to follow up on? What do I face today? And I tell people that when you're a president of an institution and school's in session, the day never begins and ends the way you think it will. One of the things I enjoy about the summer break is the day begins and ends almost the way you think it will. Yeah. And so there's those 3 months when students aren't here, when you're still working, but the pace and the predictability is really high. The pace is average, but the predictability is high. During the school year, the pace is kind of relentless, and the predictability is really up to date.
Yeah, that's great. And I know in your book and throughout your different leadership, you talk about being, forged through challenge. And I'm just curious, when can you reflect back on a time in your leadership where you had that crucible moment, that time when that really shaped your leadership? I mean, you talked a little bit about Kissinger and some of the things that he showed, and even just in some of your discussions there. But I'm just curious personally about what that was for you.
Well, I was 26 when I began pastoring my own church, and it was just a huge privilege and just an amazing learning laboratory. I was pastor for 5 years, and during that time, I began to recognize that there were just responsibilities that you cycled into that had very mixed inputs. And this is when I really began to think through the problem of evil and suffering and the way in which it shows up in congregations. My own dad would die of a heart attack at age 60. And it was very emotionally difficult for me, but it wasn't spiritually or intellectually disorienting for me because I'd had 7 years earlier, my favorite pastor had died quite out of sync at age 32 from an accident on Mount Hood. And I had done the work then to kind of make sense of the problem of evil and suffering with my thesis advisor at Princeton, Dr. Allen. And this is what I learned. What I learned is life is cumulative. And if you will do the work when God takes you through periods of trial, when new trials come, you actually have resources that you've developed that can respond more constructively, more redemptively. And this is one of the ways in which Christians come alongside other Christians during periods of grief and suffering to sustain them, to encourage them. And it's the learning that you make or the learning you're able to undertake when you go through periods of suffering and setback that prepares you to be present for others when they enter periods of suffering and setback. And this is, my wife runs a grief recovery ministry. She's trained as a therapist and counselor. And it's just been fascinating for both of us to learn this, for both of us to learn it directly through our own experiences of suffering, but then also to have the privilege of working with people. People are in some of the most vulnerable states of mind when they enter suffering. And that has been true of my first leadership responsibility. It's been true of every leadership responsibility.
That's great. Appreciate that.
Dr. Beebe would like to guide our conversation to staying on mission when the pressure is on. Now, in moments of institutional stress like enrollment declining, natural disasters, which you've experienced there on campus, and overall economic uncertainty, how do leaders make decisions that stay true to their mission while addressing the financial enrollment realities?
Troy, that is a huge question, and it's on our mind almost daily. It really is, and so one is I start with planning. I actually have 15 categories that I report on to the board, and the first one is strategic planning, and we do a 3-year strategic map in conversation with a 10-year horizon. And so you have to start with what do you intend to get done, because you are going to have hardship and setback. You're going to have crucible moments. And the only way you adjust out of them effectively is when you know what you were hoping to do, so that you have a measurement against which you can assess your adjustment. We had if I was just to confine it to Westmont, our first big challenge was the Tea Fire of November of '08. It was the fall semester of my second year. It was just a devastating fire. Wildfires are normal in California the way hurricanes are normal to Florida, but it swept down onto campus, destroyed a third of campus, burned 8 buildings, 15 faculty homes, and 231 homes in the community. And we had just pulled the construction permit the day before for major new construction. And long story short, we would ask the county, can we give back the construction permit, let us rebuild the campus, and then come back and get it? Because they put you on a time frame in Santa Barbara.
Oh, yeah.
No, we'd like to see how you do. And so it was exhausting. It was like having 2 full-time jobs, putting the campus back together while you're also building new buildings. But in that, here were hidden blessings. People had been, just really skeptical about the need for the build. They were skeptical it would ruin the neighborhood with all the construction trucks coming up and down the road. Well, long and short of it, when 231 homes burn in your neighborhood, nobody knows who's the lumber, the load of lumber chugging up the hill. Where's it going? What address is it destined for? And it endeared, people actually had been kind of, there were mixed feelings about the college and the neighborhood. We live in a highly affluent community, the suburb of Montecito. Our next door neighbors are billionaires. And so they are very used to getting to control their circumstance and their surroundings. Well, now everybody had been touched by the fire, and especially the college. And there was just a great outpouring of empathy and true understanding. And so that was just fantastic. But here's where I think you run danger of compromise. The dangers of compromise when you're stretched for students and the culture is no longer supporting you or supporting your Christian outlook is really, how do you figure out what are your truly core commitments and how do you amplify those?
Right.
And what I've discovered during these periods of testing is the amplification that occurred before we got into the testing is what gave us momentum to get through it. Now, for example, in the mid-teens during the Obama administration, we also, at the state level, we were getting quite a bit of negative attention from the Attorney General's office over hiring rights, the right to hire people of the same faith. In other words, Christian college has the right to hire Christians as their faculty.
Right.
Well, this was getting challenged, and we could have said, well, let's do some accommodating. But literally to accommodate on who is going to be in the classroom doing the instruction and who's going to be in their office during office hours, you had better be sure that you have people who are as devoted to the faith as you are.
Right.
And that was a time when we had to say, okay, if we lose the right to hire Christians into our faculty, we have lost our identity as a college. That is worth fighting for. Now, the ways in which we made that work, that's what was time-bound, where the timeless part of us is our Christian identity. The time-bound part is, how do we make it work in each new season or each new area of challenge? And as what we have found is, as people have gotten more concerned about the culture, they become more interested in who is actually staying true to their Christian mission. And it's actually been something that we have been able to leverage for our benefit. The fact that as the culture has actually been in somewhat of disagreement over exactly what the value set will be, people have been longing for schools that are actually very strongly committed to their Christian identity and doing a lot to strengthen and advance it.
Yeah, I think that's interesting, and I just want to kind of take a moment on that, because I think what you just pointed out there is that I think that there's many times this idea that, okay, we've got these challenges, so we need to give a little bit to get to where we think we need to be. And I think that's where we've seen a lot of institutions do mission drift and have those challenges, because it's like, hey, enrollment's down. Boy, if we just get some more, more athletes on campus, maybe we can fill that up. And before you know it, you've got mission drift because you're recruiting students who don't know who you are to fill roles. And so talk a little bit about that, because I know that's one of the challenges that a lot of smaller Christian colleges face, is that we got to hit the bottom line. How do we do that while we still stay where we need to be?
Well, Bart, absolutely spot on question. And it really is up to the leadership. It's up to the board. It's up to the president. It's up to the executive team to set the tone. And by set the tone, I mean, for example, take athletics. There is a lot of success tied to being able to start athletic programs, recruit athletes, have winning teams. And that is where you actually see the pressure point, because sometimes people put winning above mission. And what I totally believe is the case is that when you hire coaches who are really committed to competitive integrity, they want to pursue excellence in their chosen athletic endeavor, but they also are deeply committed to Christ. You need your coach, the kind of the spear tip. You need your coach having a deep commitment to Christ, as well as a commitment to, your players may not be Christians as they come into the program, right, but it's going to be run as with the expectation that we honor Christ in all we do. And by setting the tone that way, it's very important to me that our coaches be devout Christians. It's very important to me that they not only be people of deep faith, but that they communicate that as a value that they have for their athletes. Meanwhile, the athletes are getting to become successful in their chosen athletic endeavor. And if you can keep that straight, this is where I actually see mission drift. I see presidents become indifferent to what's happening in the athletic department. Pretty soon, you're hiring coaches that really don't stay on point. Right. And when they don't stay on point, the players pick up the cues. Well, it doesn't really matter how I behave off the field as long as I win on the field. And pretty soon, you've actually lost the mission of the college, because you've been so indifferent to it in some of these key co-curricular activities. The other place you lose it is in your faculty hiring. And you've just got to be vigilant. And something I do, I call it the faith and fit interview. And I just tell every finalist, every faculty candidate who's a finalist for a position at Westmont, I do a faith and fit interview. And I tell them, I'm not here to evaluate your competence in your field. The department will decide that. But I'm here, I want to hear about your walk with Christ. I want you to tell me where you go to church. I want to know what your spiritual disciplines are. And what I have found is that during an interview process, people are at their best. We both want to convince the other that we're a great place to be and they should want to be here. And they're trying to convince us that we should want them here. And so I think you actually get the most honest sense of how deeply committed people are to Christian convictions. Well, if you can have a conversation that's that positive before they've ever been hired, if you end up in a situation where you have to have hard conversations about violation of Christian commitments, it's just an easier conversation to have because you've had this common point that was so positive. And I have found the Faith and Fit interview to be a critical piece in keeping us on mission.
I think that's good. It's a little bit of an underlying theme of my book, Chasing Mission Fit, in the sense that if a school can better reflect and present who they are through the coaches, through the faculty interviews, through wherever, there's not this question of, the last thing you want is a student showing up on campus and saying, wow, you take this Jesus thing seriously. And that's not a good place for that student to be, nor is it a good place for the institution to be.
No, you haven't followed through very well if that happens.
Exactly. And so that's why I think it's so critical that we present ourselves accurately, regardless. I mean, we've got a lot of people listening that are not a part of a faith-based tradition. It can go wherever you are. Be who you are and say who you are, because you're going to have people naturally attracted to that. And those are your mission fit students. But I think it's more critical for faith-based.
Yeah. No, I think you're absolutely right.
Dr. Beebe, our final topic that we wanted to get your opinion on is preparing for the future, leadership for what's next. So as you've already mentioned, you've led through fires and pandemics, economic downturns, and shifting student expectations. So in your opinion, what are the top leadership traits that you believe our next generation of higher ed leaders will need in order to survive, in order to thrive?
Well, I do believe everything begins and ends with your character, and so you have to be mindful of that. Not that we're perfect, but that we seek to live a life of integrity, to operate with integrity. I also just believe you have to stay intellectually curious, and your spiritual life will keep you anchored to your integrity. Your intellectual life will actually give you the energy to pursue the new horizons, the next horizons that are necessary. And right now, we're all very preoccupied with artificial intelligence, machine learning, and robotics. And what does it mean? What does it not mean? We're doing a lot of experimentation with that. We've set up a center, CAT Lab, the Center for Applied Technology, which is really exploring how do we apply AI to education generally and faith-based higher education specifically. And so I think you have to stay in touch. I think you have to be an insatiable reader. I read every morning, as I mentioned, often 3 hours a morning. And some of it is recommended to me by other presidents, some of it is recommended to me by other readings, and some of it is just my own interest and curiosity. But you have to feed that, and you have to have the discipline to feed it. I think if a person believes they can wake up in the morning and decide that morning what they should do, and it not be any kind of tied to something that is sustainable, I just don't think you will continue to grow and develop in ways that help you answer new questions from new challenges. The challenges that I'm facing now, I'm in my 25th year as a president, some of them are completely the same. Enrollment, budgets. But some of them are completely new, like where we need to go with curriculum innovation, how we're going to resource key areas like advancement and enrollment, and the role in which technology is playing has shifted. And the biggest shift is what can we get done through AI? My son is an accountant, and he tells me that he actually uses AI to help him write memos. The others that are influencing me, and I'm doing some short courses and training, one of the main ways in which they're trying to get me to work is to use AI to manage data. And so I've really charged our VP of Institutional Technology with the assignment of putting together a short course for the executive team on the new uses of technology, and specifically AI, as we move deeper into the 21st century. And I think you just have to stay in conversation with it. I don't think AI will replace us. I don't think Bill Gates thinking that it will become, an alternative to doctors and teachers. But we have to stay engaged so that we know how to use it. I have a nephew who works for Adobe, and it's fascinating to me to talk to him because he's on the cutting edge of the integration of technology into real-time work. And he understands it in a way that I need to understand it enough to be effective. But I see that as a critical area. And then the loss of moral knowledge in the West. This is a book that was written by Dallas Willard as he was in the final years of his life. And I think that we have to get back to thinking about what is the moral mission of the West. We used to have a strong sense of being the moral leader for the world order. And that has definitely been shattered. And I hope it isn't Humpty Dumpty where you can't put it back together again. But it's going to take work, and it's going to take being able to work with people that we haven't always worked with effectively. But we do need the world order to actually reflect a moral outlook, and it's struggling to do that now.
Yeah, I appreciate what you're saying there, because I've done some research, and I've done a lot with generative AI. And one of the things that we're seeing, research is proving out that leaders who adopt and are curious about generative AI before the rest of their team does better. And so I applaud you for what you're doing with your executive team, because what I see a lot of times is that this desire to integrate generative AI into higher ed bubbles up from below, and then usually the executive team just doesn't really engage with it, and so it fizzles out. And so I'm curious about that, because I think that that's, in addition to the specifics that you talked about with artificial intelligence, I also think that the speed of which things are changing, it's going to be very difficult for leadership to manage change. That's going to be a skill set that I think that leaders are going to really need to survive as well as to thrive. So this is a little bit of a curveball, but tell me a little bit about your thoughts on that, on how do you, as leaders, get better at change management when things are coming very fast?
Well, Bart, I mean, that's a huge question, a great question, but it just impossible to get my arms around entirely. One of the things that I have benefited from in terms of membership on my executive teams, your friend Matt Osborne, my friend Matt Osborne, we worked together for 7 years at Spring Arbor, and he was the VP of enrollment then. Matt was just a compulsive reader and a compulsive learner, as am I. And I think often we think we should have the answer. And so we are very reluctant to admit we don't have the answer, and we're in fact in the process of trying to find it. I feel that about AI, that I am just reading because I know I haven't yet reached conclusions, but I need to be experimenting. I need to be finding my way in it. And I think that change management is very much that way, that I talk about how do you stay emotionally present to your people and to your projects. And you have to stay emotionally present to your people to keep them motivated so that they feel your closeness and proximity. But you have to stay emotionally connected to your projects as well, so that you don't give up on them. And I think one of the things that cuts the nerve of change management is when people sense, okay, let's just wait him out. If we wait long enough, maybe he'll quit asking about it. But that is just the sabotage that actually really short circuits change management. And so I have found, staying emotionally present, being determined, setting goals and working to achieve them are actually ways in which we stay on track with change management when we've needed it. I mean, we are now a Salesforce campus. This initiative was led by Reed Sheard, our VP of Advancement and Chief Information Officer. But we benefited from a number of different people on the campus. Our registrar, Michelle Hardley, one of our techies, Zach Landrum, who runs the CAT lab, and just several others who played a role in helping us go through the process. That was a huge change management operation and initiative. And we basically took 8 specific, unique areas of the college and have migrated all 8 into a Salesforce environment, which is allowing us to just pick up huge economies of scale and really manage our data much better, be much more effective. It allows us to be both present and virtual so that you can get instant access to your data. And that's just, that's something that was really a college-wide initiative. It took basically 4 years. I mean, it started just as we were coming out of the pandemic, but it has allowed us to actually rely on a lot fewer people to get our work done. It's picked up some real benefits there, but also has moved us into an environment that's totally stable and has high security. And you can't have your information be vulnerable. And so being with a recognized partner like Salesforce has just been a huge help on the security front as well.
Yeah. I just want to point out something before we kind of close here, but I like how you talked about that, and you gave an example with Salesforce of being able to implement something within the midst of change management and a lot of things whirling. You made a comment that I wanted to kind of tease out a little bit that I thought was fascinating, is when you talked about the idea of being present, emotionally present and being present in the moment.
Yeah.
I think that's really good, because when we are going to be dealing with change management, being present and being emotionally engaged requires our own management of ourselves, which comes through the disciplines that we do. And as believers, I know you and I talk about spiritual disciplines, but that to me I think is the start of a lot of things that you and I've talked about today with Troy.
If I can just amplify that in 60 seconds, when I was still working in theological education, I became convinced of the necessity of self-awareness, self-regulation, self-reflection. And these were coming out of the burgeoning interest in emotional intelligence at that time. And I've just seen it even more. People who can self-regulate often know how to discipline themselves in the moment so that they don't ruin opportunities or self-sabotage. And there are just so many new discoveries that deal with neuroscience, just brain science, how we have to be disciplined. Andrew Newberg's work, How God Changes Your Brain, when he was at University of Penn, is a fascinating study of how 12 minutes a day of prayer and meditation can actually rewire your brain for success in ways that even prescription medication can't. And so I think there's just growing, sustaining evidence of the importance of having what we've always referred to as a spiritual life, but that discipline of actually thinking through and developing capacities for self-regulation that allow you to preserve your response in the moment.
Yeah, that's great.
Dr. Beebe, I love what you've shared, and as you've probably seen me noting, you are very wise, and I've gotten a lot from you today, so thank you very much, and I'm sure our audience will do the same. But I don't want to ask for too much, but we always end with this question with our guests. What is one final piece of advice or insight that you would like to leave with our audience to help them take action today?
Well, I just really believe that every day, if you can wake up and you can ask God, who are the people that will cross my path today that I can encourage, that I can be present to, that I can lift their burden. I think as you go through life, you just recognize that you actually are around people that are really facing some of life's biggest challenges. And you have an opportunity. You have so many opportunities to actually touch the life of another person if you're just willing to stop, take time, and actually do it. And I have found that is often just brought me into conversation and into proximity with people who are struggling with the biggest issues in life, and it has really encouraged them. And I hope that each of us, as we live into our responsibilities today, there'll be time and energy to fulfill our responsibilities, but I hope we take time for each other.
That's great.
Well said, and thank you. Everyone, we've been speaking to Dr. Gayle Beebe. He is the president at Westmont College and the author of the book, Crucibles That Shape Us, Navigating the Defining Challenges of Leadership. Dr. Beebe, for anyone that would like to follow up with you, what would be the best way for them to reach you at?
president@westmont.edu. That's my email address. It's very, very easy to remember.
Great.
president@westmont.edu.
Very good. Again, thank you for your time and the wisdom that you've shared with us today.
My privilege. Love being
Bart,
with you.
do you have any final thoughts that you would like to share?
Yeah, I just really enjoyed this conversation so much with Dr. Beebe. Thank you for being with us. And it's an honor to kind of hear you kind of reflect and be as articulate and intentional with what we've talked about with the disciplines and with being able to be present. I think if anybody who's listening to this, whether you're a social media manager at an institution or whether you are a president, and I know that we have the entire gamut of listeners, work tomorrow and today on being more present. I think that is just one of the things that I just really took away from this conversation. I mean, yeah, we can get into some of the details about AI, we can talk about marketing, but we're not going to be effective if we're not present. Yeah. And so I really, really appreciate this conversation, this reminder, and just a way for me to be inspired in my own life and just what we've talked about today. So thanks again.
You bet. My privilege. Thank you so much.
Well said, Bart. And again, thank you. And to our listeners, thank you so much for listening to the Higher Ed Marketer podcast. And if you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe to the show or leave us a review and help us reach other colleagues in higher ed marketing. And don't forget to follow us on LinkedIn at the Higher Ed Marketer for more updates and insights. Be on the lookout for our brand new summer series starting very soon. The Higher Ed Marketer podcast is powered by Kaler Solutions, your go-to partner for higher ed mission-fit marketing strategies, enrollment, and branding needs. And sponsored by Ring Digital, your ad targeting experts in higher ed, putting you in front of your specific prospects and inquiries with provable, measurable increases in lift and yield. Everyone, thank you so much for joining us today.